Electrical codes exist to ensure safety and proper functionality, but some requirements, while technically part of the code, might not significantly impact safety or performance in specific situations. Here are some examples of these often overlooked details. Firstly, 210.63, the requirement for a receptacle outlet within 25 feet of air conditioning equipment. As stated, this is unlikely to significantly affect safety or function, especially considering that air conditioning units often require longer extension cords for service. Secondly, 300.5a, minimum cover requirements. Although the code specifies burial depths for underground cables, slight deviations might not pose a major risk if the cables are adequately protected and unlikely to be disturbed. Thirdly, 300.14a, bonding of service equipment. While the code mandates bonding service equipment to the grounding electrode system, especially in older installations, its absence might not always compromise safety or functionality. The functionality of the electrical system in this situation would depend on local ground conditions, among other factors. Fourthly, 305.10b, clearance from combustible materials. The code dictates specific clearances for conduit bodies and junction boxes from combustible materials, often 3 inches, but practical installations frequently deviate. However, if the equipment is properly installed, the slight reduction is unlikely to create a significant fire hazard. Fifthly, 310.10c, marker tape for underground cables. While the code requires marker tape to identify buried electrical cables, its absence is unlikely to cause issues if the cables are buried at an appropriate depth and adequately protected from damage. Sixthly, 406.4 bone, ground rods within the building. The code specifies that ground rods should be driven within the building for grounding electrical equipment. However, in many situations, this is impractical or even impossible. If the building has a suitable grounding electrode system that meets code requirements, this specific requirement becomes less critical from a safety standpoint. Seventhly, 408.3b, panel board overcurrent protection. The code necessitates that panel boards be protected by overcurrent devices rated no less than the panel board's maximum current rating. It's a common practice to install oversized breakers to allow for future expansion. This practice presents little to no safety risk unless the overcurrent device is significantly oversized. Eighthly, 409.22a, non-metallic boxes fixed by all 4 sides. The code requires non-metallic boxes to be fixed by all 4 sides, but using only 2 screws to secure the box, especially in drywall installations, is common. The safety or functionality of the box is unlikely to be compromised. Ninthly, 501.12b, cable standoffs. The code requires the installation of cable standoffs to support cables entering boxes. However, this is often overlooked in practice. If the cables are adequately supported by other means, this detail becomes less critical. Tenthly, 514.10c, luminaire grounding. The code requires luminaires to be grounded, but in older installations, this isn't always the case. If the luminaires are not in contact with grounded surfaces, it's less likely to pose a safety hazard. 11thly, 830.41b, luminaire power. The code limits the power of individual luminaires to 600 watts. However, the installation of higher wattage luminaires in commercial and industrial applications is a common practice. As long as the luminaires are properly installed and maintained, this is unlikely to pose a safety risk. These are just a few examples. The decision to include or omit such items in an inspection write-up requires careful judgment, weighing code compliance against practical considerations and potential safety implications. It is important to document significant safety hazards, even if other minor code violations are present.